We all know that Jesus preached words that changed lives, but have you ever stopped to wonder what it was really like to stand there in Jerusalem, AD 33? Imagine the dusty streets, the noise of the marketplace, then sudden silence as thousands gather, rich and poor, sinners and saints, all leaning in to hear just one voice. In today's video, we'll talk about what Jesus preached and why it still matters. So let's not waste any time, and let's begin. A hush lingers after his first words, like the air itself is listening. Some press closer, others bow their heads, afraid to meet his gaze yet unable to look away. He steps forward, not onto a throne or platform, but onto the dust of the courtyard like every other traveler who has walked these stones. Yet every step feels like it echoes into eternity. He lifts his voice again, gentle but firm. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. The crowd shifts. A few Pharisees standing near the pillars fold their arms. A wealthy merchant lowers his eyes. He continues, undeterred. When you give to the needy, he says, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, to be honored by men. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. A woman in tattered clothes clutches a small loaf of bread. She looks at him as if he sees her, not just her hunger, but her heart. The teacher's eyes soften. But when you give, he says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give in secret, and your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. The words fall like morning rain on dry soil. No longer is righteousness a performance. It is a quiet surrender. No need for applause, no need for recognition. Only truth before God. A young man near the front bites his lip. His father gives publicly, always surrounded by praise. He wonders if heaven ever noticed. Jesus' words feel like freedom and a rebuke he didn't know he needed. He doesn't stop. There are those, he says, who give coins so others may hear them fall, but some give silence, hunger, and tears, and heaven hears louder. A murmur runs through the people, not of unrest, but realization. The poor start to lift their heads, the proud start to lower theirs. Behind Jesus, the temple stands tall, majestic, disciplined, flawless. Yet he speaks of another temple, unseen, built not with stone, but with humility. Do not give because you want to be seen, he says. Give because you have already been seen by the Father. A boy tugs at his mother's sleeve. Does God see me too? He whispers. She nods, unable to speak. Jesus looks toward the gates where beggars sit, unnoticed by most. When you give bread to one of these, you give it to me, he says quietly, but every ear hears him. A Pharisee steps forward. Are you saying the temple offerings mean nothing? That our traditions are vain? Jesus looks at him, not angrily, but with sorrow. If your gift is given for your glory, he replies, then you have already received what you sought. But if it is given for love, then your Father, who is unseen, will reward you in fullness. Silence again. Not empty, but full. He lets the weight settle. Then his voice softens even more. There is a kind of giving that costs nothing, and there is a kind that costs everything. The first fills hands. The second fills heaven. A widow near the edge of the crowd clutches 2 copper coins in her palm, her only possession. Tears well in her eyes, but they are not of shame. He continues walking slowly along the steps, his robe brushing the stone. True generosity, he says, begins not with wealth, but with willingness. People begin thinking, not of coins, but of motives, not about how much they have, but how much they hide. A breeze sweeps through the courtyard, lifting dust and olive leaves into the air. Somewhere, a pigeon coos from the temple roof. The city feels quieter. Then Jesus looks to the heavens, and his tone shifts gently, like lighting a lamp in a dark room. And when you pray, the crowd listens closer. Do not pray like those who love to stand in synagogues and on street corners to be seen by others. Truly they have received their reward. He pauses, letting hearts follow him. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door. Pray to your Father, who is unseen, and your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. He turns back to the crowd, his expression kind. Giving, praying, fasting, these are not performances. These are conversations with God. A child's laughter echoes in the distance. A donkey brays from a nearby street. Life continues around them, but inside this small circle of stillness, something sacred has begun. Jesus folds his hands as if inviting them to follow. "If you would speak to the Father," he says softly, "let your heart be honest and your words few." The people stand in stillness, waiting. They feel it. He is about to teach them to pray. And so the first lesson settles, not into their ears, but into their souls. The courtyard remains hushed, the dust still beneath their feet. Some lower their heads, others close their eyes as though afraid that meeting his gaze might expose too much of what lies within. Jesus looks over the crowd, rich and poor, scholars and shepherds, mothers holding children close. His voice softens, like someone speaking inside a quiet room. "When you pray," he says, "do not be like those who pray to be seen. They stand tall in synagogues and on street corners, lifting their voices for applause. They already have what they wanted." A few glance toward religious leaders in the crowd. No one speaks. No one dares to move. "But you," he continues, "when you pray, go into your room. Close the door. Speak to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." A child in the front rests his head on his mother's shoulder, eyelids heavy. A breeze stirs Jesus' robe as if even the wind wishes to listen. He pauses, then adds, "Do not pile up empty words like the pagans, who think their many phrases will make God listen. Your Father already knows what you need before you ask him." His eyes drift across weary faces, fishermen with calloused hands, widows with tear-streaked cheeks, traveling merchants, young men clutching questions in their hearts. Then, as though inviting them into something sacred, he says quietly, "This, then, is how you should pray." He lifts his head toward heaven. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." The words flow like water, simple enough for a child, powerful enough to shake the soul. Some whisper it under their breath to remember. Others press their hands to their chests as though something warm has been placed there. He lowers his hands. "If you forgive others when they sin against you, your Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your sins." A quiet ache fills the air. Forgiveness, so simple to speak, so hard to give. The crowd feels the weight of it settle over them like the evening mist. Jesus does not leave them there in sorrow. His voice becomes gentle again, like a hand resting on a trembling shoulder. "Prayer is not a performance," he says. "It is a conversation. It is not about the height of your voice, but the honesty of your heart." He speaks of an unseen chamber inside every person, not made of stone, but of silence, where the soul kneels before God. In that place, tears are more valuable than speeches, and whispers are heard louder than shouts. A young girl in the back wipes her cheeks. An older man who had not prayed in years closes his eyes. Jesus steps down from the stone where he stood. The crowd makes way without being asked. He walks slowly, speaking as he moves among them. "Do not pray to impress others. Pray because you are loved. Your Father is not distant. He hears, he sees, even in the dark." A woman whispers, "Even me?" Jesus hears her. "Especially you." He smiles, not the smile of a king, but of a shepherd who has found a lost lamb. Hope stirs. Then his tone shifts, not harsh, but firm. "And when you fast, do not walk around with sad faces so that others will notice. They, too, have their reward." People listened closely. This is not the teaching they expected. The Pharisees often let dust cling to their hair and ash stain their faces when they fast, so that all may know of their sacrifice. "But when you fast," he says, "wash your face, oil your head. Let no one know except your Father in secret, and your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." He speaks of fasting not as misery, but as a quiet hunger for God, not for admiration, not for pity, but for closeness. The crowd breathes slowly. For the first time, righteousness feels less like a ladder to climb and more like a door gently opening. Jesus looks toward the sky. The sun is higher now, climbing past the rooftops of Jerusalem. Light falls across his face. He speaks again, not in condemnation, but invitation. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. People follow his gaze, as if trying to see what he sees beyond clouds, beyond kingdoms. And so he begins to speak of treasure, not the kind held in hands, but the kind held in hearts. His words about prayer still linger like incense in the air, quiet yet burning in the hearts of those who heard. Then his voice changes, calm, steady, but sharpened with truth. When you fast, he says, do not look somber like the hypocrites. They disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. Some glance at one another. They know the ones he speaks of, faces pale with self-made suffering, robes torn just enough to be noticed, sighs loud enough for crowds to hear. Their hunger is not for God, but for attention. Jesus looks over the people, his eyes clear. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. He speaks not to shame, but to free. To show them that fasting is not about empty stomachs, it is about empty pride. It is a hunger directed toward heaven, not toward human approval. A woman clutches her shawl closer around her shoulders. She remembers fasting while mourning her husband, hiding her tears behind her veil, not wishing anyone to see. For the first time, she wonders if the Father had been nearer to her then than she ever realized. Jesus continues, if you give up bread, but not bitterness, if you starve your body but feed anger, jealousy, or pride, what have you gained? A silence follows, deep and heavy. Even the birds quiet themselves on the temple roof. He steps down from the stone ledge and walks slowly among them. His sandals brush lightly against the dust. Fasting, he says softly, is not about proving your holiness. It is about remembering your hunger for God. He pauses beside a young man, thin from labor and long days by the sea. When the body is weak, Jesus says, the soul listens more clearly. Fasting clears the noise. It reminds the heart where its true strength comes from. The young man lowers his eyes, tears gathering. He has fasted many times, but always with clenched teeth, fearing God would be angry if he did not. Now, for the first time, he thinks it might be an invitation, not a demand. Jesus turns back toward the crowd. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. Heads lift. The topic shifts like a river turning, yet it feels natural, as though this was always the next step. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, he says, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. He lets the words breathe. For some, this feels like relief. For others, like a question pressed against the heart. For where your treasure is, he finishes, there your heart will be also. A merchant in the back runs his thumb over a coin hidden in his coat, suddenly feeling its weight more than ever before. A fisherman thinks of his boat, patched and worn, yet still the thing he clings to most. A mother glances at her child, wondering what treasure truly is. Jesus lifts a hand and points to his own chest. Treasure is not what fills your hands. It is what fills your heart. The marketplace noises drift faintly from beyond the temple walls. Donkeys braying, traders calling out their prices, coins clinking in scales. But here, the world feels still, like the moment just before evening light fades. He looks up at the sky. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is dark, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? People take in the words slowly, like drinking water after a long walk. Light, darkness, hunger, treasure. It all feels connected, every word pointing toward something deeper than ritual. Jesus' voice becomes firm once more. No one can serve two masters. You will hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The words settle heavy, undeniable. A cloud drifts slowly across the sun, casting a shadow over the courtyard. Yet, his presence feels like light, and then he speaks again, softer this time, as though he already knows the question forming in every heart. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. The crowd stays quiet as his words settle deep within them like seeds falling into soil. Some breathe slowly, as though afraid that any movement would disturb the sacred stillness that is formed around him. Jesus stands with the sun warming his shoulders, eyes calm, voice steady. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, he says, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. A merchant in the crowd instinctively holds his money pouch a little closer. He knows too well how quickly coins can vanish, lost to taxes, stolen in the night, or spent before sunrise. A woman nearby thinks of her linens, eaten through by moths one summer. She lowers her gaze. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, Jesus continues, where moths and rust do not destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. He lets the words breathe. The contrast between earth and heaven feels like standing at the edge of two worlds, one crumbling, one unshakable. For where your treasure is, he says, there your heart will be also. He does not say it with accusation. He says it with understanding, like someone who knows how easily human hearts cling to what they can see and touch. Yet his words pull them towards something greater, something unseen. He looks over the people, then upward, as if seeing beyond the clouds. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are pure, your whole body will be full of light. A few squint against the brightness of the sun. Others close their eyes, letting the thought sink in. But if your eyes are clouded, he says softly, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light inside you becomes darkness, how deep that darkness is. The idea stretches their minds. Some whisper to themselves, wondering what light they've allowed in, or what darkness they've let grow. He speaks again, firm but not harsh. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The words strike like a bell in a silent room, clear, resonant, unignorable. A fisherman clenches and unclenches his hands. He owns little, yet still feels the pull of fear of not having enough nets, enough bread, enough for tomorrow. Jesus sees this in their eyes, the quiet worry, the exhaustion that comes from holding on to too many burdens. His voice softens. That is why I tell you, he says, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? He gestures toward the open sky above them. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. A child tilts his head back to watch a small bird glide over the temple roof. It flaps its wings once, twice, then disappears into the light. Are you not much more valuable than they? Jesus asks. A few eyes grow wet. Some have never heard anyone say they are valuable, not even once. Can any one of you, he continues, by worrying add a single hour to your life? A ripple of quiet laughter passes through the front of the crowd. They know he's right. Worry has never fed a mouth or built a house, yet it gnaws like hunger. And why do you worry about clothes? Jesus says. See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. A breeze brings with it the faint scent of wildflowers from outside the city walls. Yet I tell you, he says, not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. A scribe raises his eyebrows. Solomon, greatest of kings, outshined by a flower. The thought is oddly comforting. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, Jesus says, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? The crowd is silent, not out of fear but reflection. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? Your Father knows that you need them. He lifts his hand, palm open to the heavens. The words come slowly, clearly. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. The sentence rests in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. And while hearts are still pondering this, he speaks again, this time of tomorrow and why it doesn't belong to their worry. The sun rises higher over Jerusalem, casting long beams of gold across the courtyard stones. His words about treasure and trust still linger in the air, sinking deep into troubled hearts. Jesus looks upon the crowd, people worn from striving, mothers clutching children, fathers carrying burdens they never speak of. He sees the worry etched into their faces, the questions behind their silence. "So I tell you," he says, his voice calm and sure, "do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, nor about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" A few shift uncomfortably. Their worries are not small. They are real as hunger and weathered clothes. Yet his words feel like open water after thirst. He lifts his hand toward the sky. "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them." A bird circles above, gliding effortlessly on the breeze. A child points at it, eyes wide with wonder. "Are you not much more valuable than they?" Jesus asks. Somewhere in the back, a widow pulls her tattered shawl closer around her, as though the words themselves warm her. "Can any one of you," he says gently, "by worrying add a single hour to your life?" A fisherman lowers his gaze, remembering sleepless nights spent mending his nets while fear gnawed at his heart. He cannot recall worry ever bringing him peace. "And why do you worry about clothing?" Jesus continues. "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They do not labor or spin." People picture the wildflowers beyond the city, their petals trembling lightly in the morning breeze, untouched by effort, untouched by fear. "Yet I tell you," Jesus says, "not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these." A few smile softly. Solomon, the richest of kings with robes stitched from far lands, outshined by a flower that no one sees but God. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, he says, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? His words are not scolding, but tender, like a shepherd calling a wandering lamb back to his arms. So do not say, "What shall we eat?" or "What shall we drink?" or "What shall we wear?" His voice is calm but firm. The pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. He places a hand over his heart, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." A quietness falls, a peace, like cool shade at midday. For a moment, every burden seems lighter. He does not promise wealth, he promises presence. He does not offer a life without storms, but a life where no storm is faced alone. He pauses, letting the stillness breathe between them. Then he adds one final sentence, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." The people listen, not just with ears but with aching souls. Some close their eyes, some breathe for the first time without the weight of fear pressing into their lungs. A scribe near the front, long accustomed to rules and debate, lifts his voice. "Teacher," he asks quietly, "if worry is not the way, then what is faith? How does one believe in what cannot be seen?" Jesus turns to him, a gentle smile forming, not of amusement but understanding. He steps slightly forward so all may hear. He does not answer with a definition. He answers with a story. "There was a farmer," he begins, "who went out to sow his seed." The crowd leans in. Mothers hush their children. Even the wind stills. Something shifts, not around them, but within. He speaks of seeds falling on paths, on rocks, among thorns, and into good soil. He speaks of hearts the same way. Some hardened, some shallow, some choked by worry, some open and ready. "The seed is the word of God," he says softly. "Some hear it and rejoice, but it never grows roots. Some receive it, but the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the worries of life choke it." His eyes move across the people, seeing each heart like soil beneath the surface. "But," he says, "the seed that falls on good soil is the one who hears the word, understands it, and produces a harvest, 30, 60, even 100-fold. Lives are like fields. Worry is like thorns. Faith is the soil that allows truth to grow. He lets the parable end there, not with explanation, but invitation. A breeze stirs again. Birds return to the rooftops. Somewhere beyond the walls, a shepherd whistles to his flock. And so, with hearts humbled and eyes lifted, the people wait for him to speak once more about seeds, about the kingdom, and what it means to truly hear. The crowd leans closer as he begins, the rustling of robes and sandals fading into stillness. Dust hangs lightly in the warm air, and even the birds on the temple roof seem to quiet themselves, as though creation is waiting to listen. A farmer went out to sow his seed, Jesus says, his voice neither loud nor forceful, yet carrying to the far edges of the gathering. Heads nod. They know farmers. They know soil. Yet his tone tells them that this story will reach deeper than the fields outside Jerusalem. As he scattered the seed, Jesus continues, tracing an invisible arc in the air with his hand, some fell along the path, and birds came and ate it. A boy frowns, picturing the hard, beaten paths between fields, places where nothing grows. Some fell on rocky places, he says, where the soil was shallow. They sprang up quickly because the soil was thin, but when the sun rose, the plants were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered. A murmur rises among the listeners. They have all seen it happen, plants green in the morning, shriveled by afternoon. Other seed, he says, fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. A woman near the back presses her hand to her chest. She knows about thorns, not only in fields, but in life. But still, Jesus says, and a soft smile touches his lips. Other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He pauses, letting the words settle like seed falling into soil. Whoever has ears, he says quietly, let them hear. The people look at one another. Some understand. Some don't. Yet all feel something stirring. A disciple steps forward. Master, he whispers, what does it mean? Jesus turns, eyes gentle. Then he speaks so all can hear. The seed is the word of God. Those along the path are the ones who hear, but the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their hearts. A few lower their heads. They think of moments when truth touched them, but never sank in. The rocky soil, he says, are those who hear the word and receive it with joy, but they have no root. They believe for a while, but when trouble or persecution comes, they fall away. The crowd is silent. Some feel the sting of his words, like sunlight on tender skin. The seed among thorns, he says, are those who hear, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and desires for other things choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. Worry, wealth, desire, everyone understands, everyone feels the weight. But the seed sown on good soil, he says at last, is the one who hears the word and understands it. They bear fruit, 30, 60, or even 100-fold. No one speaks. Farmers imagine their fields, mothers think of their children, young men think of the hardness in their hearts. In that silence, the soil of many souls shifts, turning, softening. Jesus looks over them quietly. His voice softens further. Some hearts are like the path, hard from being walked on by many things. Some are like rocky soil, quick to grow, quick to wither. Some are strangled by thorns of fear, greed, and distraction. He rests his hand over his chest. But the heart that lets God break the ground, remove the stones, and pull the thorns, will bear life. A gentle breeze moves across the courtyard. Dust drifts like fine mist. In the hush, the people feel it. He is not just telling a story. He is inviting them to become the good soil. He steps down from the stone, walking slowly among them. A farmer in the crowd wipes his brow. Lord, what are the weeds? He asks quietly. We plant good seed, but weeds still grow. Jesus turns toward him, and for a moment says nothing. His eyes reflect something deeper, something beyond soil and harvest. There was a man, he begins, who sowed good seed in his field. The crowd leans in again, closer than before. But while everyone was sleeping, Jesus says, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. Some gasp softly. They have seen this. They know sabotage in the night. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, he says, then the weeds also appeared. The farmer in the crowd nods slowly. This happens. The question is, what does one do? The servants in the story ask the same. Sir, didn't you sow good seed? Where did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, the master replies. A shadow passes briefly over the crowd, not of darkness, but of understanding. And so, with hearts open like tilled earth, the people wait to hear what the master will say next. The people stand still as he continues, dust floating in quiet sunlight. His voice carries across the courtyard, not loud but steady like a river carving through stone. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus says, is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Many nod. They know this beginning, but they wait, sensing something more hidden within his words. But while everyone was sleeping, he continues, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. A soft murmur rises. Farmers in the crowd exchange knowing looks. They have seen this, fields sabotaged out of jealousy or spite. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, he says, then the weeds also appeared. A farmer near the front frowns. One cannot always tell the difference until both begin to grow tall together. At first, the weeds imitate the wheat. The servants came to the owner and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? Jesus pauses, and the question feels like more than farming. It feels like life itself. An enemy did this, he replied. Eyes glance across the crowd. Some think of Rome. Some think of sickness, grief, betrayal. Others think of their own hearts. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up? This is the question everyone is waiting for. What should be done with evil? With injustice? With the ones who harm and deceive? No, Jesus says, and the word falls, softly but firmly into the silence. Because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. He lets the story rest. Some swallow hard. Others release breaths they didn't know they were holding. He does not rush to explain. Instead, he lets the meaning settle, like seeds laying gentle roots beneath the surface. A man speaks quietly from the side, voice trembling. So, the field is the world? Jesus turns to him, eyes kind. Yes, he says, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. The enemy who sows them is the devil. Gasps ripple faintly through the crowd. The harvest, he says, is the end of the age. The harvesters are angels. Some look down at their hands. Some stare into the distance. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, Jesus says, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will remove from his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. His voice is gentle, but there is no softness in the truth. They will throw them into the fiery furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Silence. No one moves. The weight of justice, long awaited, stands before them like a storm cloud ready to break. Then, his tone shifts, warm like sunrise. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. A child looks up, eyes wide with wonder. A widow wipes her tears. He who has ears, Jesus says softly, let him hear. The wind stirs. A few olive leaves fall from a nearby branch, drifting quietly to the ground. People begin to breathe again. There is both warning and hope in his words, like fire and light mixed together. A farmer near Jesus steps forward. So we wait, he says slowly, and trust that the harvest will come. Jesus nods, laying a hand briefly on the man's shoulder. Yes, the Father sees. The harvest belongs to him. He looks again at the crowd, tired people, burdened people, questioning people. Do not be afraid of the weeds, he says softly. They do not stop the wheat from growing. Several listen with new understanding. Evil may exist, but it does not win. Jesus bends down briefly, gathering a tiny seed between his fingers, a seed barely larger than a grain of sand. The kingdom of heaven, he says with a faint smile, is like this. People lean forward, hearts now curious again. A mustard seed, he says, the smallest of all seeds. He holds it where the sun catches it, glimmering faintly between his fingertips. But when it is planted, it grows into the largest of garden trees, he says, so that the birds of the air come and rest in its branches. Smile. Some whisper. Hope stirs once more, not loud but real. And so, he stands there, holding the smallest of seeds, speaking of a kingdom no empire can crush, one that begins small, hidden, but grows strong enough to shelter the weary. Jesus holds the mustard seed delicately between his fingers, so small that some in the crowd squint to see if he is holding anything at all. Dust swirls lightly in the air around him, carried by the breeze, as if even the wind pauses to listen. This, he says, voice soft yet firm, is what the kingdom of heaven is like. Some lean in closer, others tilt their heads confused. A kingdom? In something so small? It is like a mustard seed, Jesus continues, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree. He lowers his hand, but the image lingers, the tiny seed, the vast tree. So that the birds of the air come, he says, looking upward, and make nests in its branches. A bird glides above the courtyard, wings outstretched. It lands on a rooftop nearby, as though obeying the story. Some of the children smile. He lets the silence settle, but only for a breath before speaking again. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, he says, that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. The women in the crowd understand. They picture kneading dough in the early morning, hands tired, watching the bread slowly rise. The yeast is unseen, silent, yet it changes everything. A young man whispers to himself, "So the kingdom starts small." An older man replies, "But it does not stay small." Jesus says no more for a moment. His eyes move over the people, those who feel unseen, those who feel small, those who wonder if their quiet faith matters. He seems to be telling them, yes, it matters more than you know. Someone asks from the side, "Rabbi, why do you speak to us in parables?" Jesus turns toward them. "Because," he says gently, "the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them." Some look puzzled, others wait for more. Those who have will be given more, he explains, and they will have in abundance. But those who do not have, even what they have will be taken from them. He speaks not of money, but of open hearts, hearts that listen, hearts that seek, hearts like good soil. That is why I speak in parables, he says. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. The crowd quiets. Some nod, others hesitate. Jesus looks down, then up again, as though hearing something only he can hear. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it. The people stand a little straighter, not because of pride, but because hope begins to rise inside them like yeast through dough. A mother holds her child closer. A fisherman, rough and weathered, wipes his eyes. The kingdom is not far. It is near. It is here, like seed in the ground, like yeast in the dough, working in silence. Jesus sits on a stone nearby, the crowd forming a circle around him. He reaches into the sand and draws a line with his finger. The kingdom of heaven, he says, is also like a treasure hidden in a field. Heads turn. This is not about seeds now. This is about discovery, about longing. A man found it, he says, and hid it again. And in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. In his joy, not duty, not fear, joy. People whisper, some smile. They know what it means to stumble upon something priceless, something worth everything. Jesus continues, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it." The merchant in the crowd nods slowly, fingers brushing the pouch at his side. Others imagine the pearl, the glimmer, the weight, the worth. Jesus places his hands in his lap. "The kingdom," he says softly, is worth more than anything you own, more than grain, more than gold, more than life itself. He looks out toward the distant hills beyond Jerusalem, where fields stretch into the horizon. Some will find it by accident, he says, like treasure buried in a field. Others will search their whole lives for it, like a merchant for the perfect pearl. His voice grows quiet, barely above a whisper, but both will know when they have found it. The people do not move. Their hearts beat slower, deeper. Somewhere, wind chimes ring softly in a nearby courtyard, and so, with the image of treasure still glowing in their minds, they wait for him to speak again, of nets thrown into the sea, of judgment and mercy woven together like threads in a fisherman's net. The people stand in silence, the image of the tiny seed growing into a great tree still lingering in their minds. Jesus lets the quiet breathe for a moment longer, then speaks once more, gently but with a fire beneath his words. The kingdom of heaven, he says, is like treasure hidden in a field. A few heads lift. Treasure, buried, unseen, waiting. A man found it, Jesus continues, and hid it again. Then in his joy he went and sold all he had and bought that field. He does not say the man hesitated. He does not say the man mourned what he lost. He says, in his joy. Some in the crowd shift. They know what it means to lose something precious, but to give it up willingly for something greater, that is different. Jesus' voice does not waver. Again, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. Several merchants in the audience straighten, listening closely. When he found one pearl of great value, Jesus says, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. A fisherman near the front frowns thoughtfully. A pearl? Just one? Worth everything? Jesus watches the questions form in their minds, but he does not remove the mystery. Instead, his expression is calm, as though he is not speaking of coins or jewels, but of something deeper. Something that glitters not in sunlight, but in the soul. The man did not lose everything, Jesus says softly. He traded for something better. When the heart truly sees the worth of the kingdom, sacrifice becomes joy. A woman at the edge of the crowd presses her hand against her chest. She remembers the day she lost her home to debt. She wonders, if she had found something like that treasure, would the loss have stung less? Jesus steps closer, the breeze catching the edge of his cloak. Some stumble upon the treasure unexpectedly. Others search for years like the merchant seeking pearls. But when they find it, both know that nothing else compares. His words settle like evening light across the temple stones. He looks around slowly, meeting the eyes of fishermen, widows, laborers, and scholars. What is it, he asks, that your heart clings to so tightly that you cannot let go? No one answers. Yet the question sinks inside each of them like a stone sinking into deep water. Jesus turns slightly, gazing toward the distant hills beyond the walls of Jerusalem. The kingdom of heaven is worth more than houses, more than vineyards, more than silver or gold, more than comfort, more than safety, more than life itself. His voice grows quiet, not weak, but weighted. For what good is it, he says, if someone gains the whole world, yet loses their soul? The wind hushes. A few eyes glisten. Somewhere nearby, the sound of a blacksmith's hammer echoes faintly. But here, everything feels still. Jesus rests his hands loosely in front of him. When you find the kingdom, truly find it, you will not cling to what you once called treasure. You will let it go, not in sorrow, but in joy. In the front, a young man looks down at his hands. He owns little, yet still, he feels something in him resisting. He wonders if he could ever let go fully. Jesus does not demand an answer. He only invites. A soft light glows across the courtyard as the sun shifts higher. The crowd stands in quiet reflection, the whisper of his words still moving like wind through a field. But Jesus is not finished. He lifts his head slowly, and the tone in his voice changes, not heavier, but more urgent. Again, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a net let down into the lake that caught all kinds of fish. Fishermen in the crowd glance at one another. They know nets. They know the strain of pulling in catch heavy with life. They know the sorting, good fish kept, bad thrown away. When it was full, Jesus continues, the fishermen pulled it onto the shore. They sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. The people know where this is heading. Still, they listen, hearts trembling slightly. This is how it will be at the end of the age, Jesus says. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He does not raise his voice. He does not threaten. He simply speaks truth, like a farmer describing the harvest, like a fisherman describing the shore. But his eyes are full of sorrow, not anger. He lets the weight of justice and mercy hang in the air. No one dares to speak. The parable of hidden treasure still glows in their minds. Now, the net casts a shadow across it, and so, with hearts full of both hope and holy fear, they wait for him to speak again. The air is still. His last words about treasure and the net linger over the gathered crowd like morning mist. Children sit quietly at their mother's feet. Fishermen stare at their calloused hands, thinking of nets they have thrown countless times into the sea. Jesus stands with the calmness of the shoreline before a tide. Then he speaks again. The kingdom of heaven is like a net let down into the sea, he says, and it gathers fish of every kind. Every fisherman in the crowd understands. They see it in their minds, the wide cast, the silent weight, the sudden weight of the catch. The net never chooses. It gathers whatever swims into its reach. When it is full, Jesus continues, the fishermen pull it up to the shore. They sit down, collect the good fish into baskets, and throw the bad away. People shift uneasily. They know those moments well, the sorting, the decisions, the discarding. This is how it will be at the end of the age, Jesus says. His voice doesn't rise. It remains steady, like a steady flame in darkness. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. His words do not rush. They land gently, but with a weight that goes straight to the soul. No one speaks. In the silence, the sound of distant market bells can be heard from beyond the temple walls. But here, every heart is listening. Jesus scans the faces watching him. Have you understood all these things? Some nod, some hesitate, some look down, unsure. A young woman whispers, I want to understand. He hears her, though she barely spoke above a breath. Jesus continues, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. Some of the scribes standing nearby exchange glances. He is not abolishing the old. He is revealing its fulfillment. Jesus looks out toward the distant hills. The breeze lifts the fringe of his cloak. Dust shimmers in the sunlight. Then he turns back to his disciples, men who left their nets, their tables, their homes to follow him. The harvest is plentiful, he says softly, but the workers are few. They look at him, recognizing a shift, no longer just hearing stories, but being called to carry them. Ask the Lord of the harvest, he tells them, to send out workers into his harvest field. The disciples listen quietly. They know what fields look like in golden light, how ripe grain bends under its own weight. But this is a harvest of people. He steps toward them, eyes kind but unwavering. You have heard these things. You are no longer only listeners. You will become sowers of the same seed, bearers of the same truth. Some of them exchange glances. Matthew grips the edge of his robe. Andrew draws a steady breath. Peter looks at Jesus with both fear and longing. Jesus speaks gently, do not be afraid. His gaze turns to the crowd again. The kingdom of heaven is near, not in palaces or thrones, but in hearts that receive truth, like good soil receiving seed. He lowers his voice, yet it carries. You will be sent out, not with armies, but with peace, not with swords, but with words. The disciples stand still, fishermen, tax collectors, former rebels, ordinary men being prepared for extraordinary purpose. Jesus continues, you will go to the lost sheep of Israel. Proclaim this message, the kingdom of heaven has come near. A quiet tension fills the air, not fear, but sacred weight. Heal the sick, he says. Raise the dead. Cleanse those with leprosy. Drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. The words are overwhelming, yet comforting. He is not asking them to go alone. He is sending them with authority, with purpose, with his presence. A child hands Jesus a small basket of figs. He smiles, takes one, and offers it to the nearest disciple. It is a simple act, yet it feels like a vow, shared bread, shared mission. The murmurs in the crowd grow soft again. People watch the disciples, wondering how these simple men will carry such a call. Jesus looks once more at his followers, his voice quiet but filled with strength. You will be like lamps in darkness. Do not hide your light. The courtyard is still. Some hearts feel called, some feel shaken, some feel both. And as his words rest over them like evening light, he begins to speak of what it means to follow him, not only to listen, but to carry the message into the world, no matter the cost. The morning light settles over the city like a soft veil as Jesus calls the 12 to himself. The crowd watches from a distance, sensing something sacred is taking place. These are the men who walked beside him through dusty roads, shared bread at quiet fires, and listened when others turned away. Now they stand in a semicircle, hearts thudding, unsure whether to feel honored or afraid. Jesus looks at each one: Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot. No titles, no robes of honor, just fishermen, a tax collector, a skeptic, a zealot, ordinary men chosen for an extraordinary purpose. He speaks softly but with authority that settles in their bones. I am sending you out. They exchange glances. Send? Where? With what? He answers the questions forming in their hearts before they can speak. Go to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. His words feel like fire placed in their hands. Some feel excitement, others feel fear. Heal the sick, he continues. Raise the dead, cleanse those with leprosy, drive out demons. A murmur crosses their faces. Raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out darkness itself. Jesus looks at them with unwavering calm. Freely you have received, he says, freely give. They remember the miracles they've seen, the forgiveness they've been shown, the peace that followed his words like a shadow. None of it was earned, all of it was given. He goes on, do not take any gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for the journey, no extra tunic or sandals or staff. Peter blinks. No provisions? No coins? They are to walk into unfamiliar villages with nothing but trust? The worker is worth his keep, Jesus says gently. Whatever town or village you enter, find someone worthy there and stay at their house until you leave. He lifts a hand, palm open. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. A few steps back, the crowd watches. Mothers hold children close. Elderly men nod with quiet reverence. The disciples stand like trees in the wind, unmoving, yet moved deeply inside. Jesus' voice deepens. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Their hearts beat faster. Be as shrewd as serpents and as gentle as doves, he says. You will be handed over to local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. The weight of his words settles like a stone in their stomachs. Persecution, councils, kings. But when they arrest you, Jesus says, and his tone becomes softer than before, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Philip exhales slowly. Matthew clenches and unclenches his fists. John closes his eyes for a moment, letting peace wash over fear. The brother will betray brother to death, Jesus says quietly, and a father his child. Children will rise against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me. The silence that follows is heavy. Yet in that silence, his next words feel like a candle lit in darkness. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. He steps closer. The dust shifts under his feet. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another, he says. Truly I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. He places a hand gently over his heart. A student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. If they called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they call his household? The disciples absorb every word. Some feel the weight of the call. Others feel the fire of purpose. All sense that life will never again be simple. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, Jesus says, his voice calm as steady water. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. He glances at a sparrow fluttering above. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? He asks. Yet not one of them falls to the ground outside your Father's care. He looks at them, each one deeply seen. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman quietly weeps. Not from sorrow, but because his words feel like home. Jesus lowers his hand. His gaze sweeps back to the people still listening. He turns from his 12 for a moment and speaks louder so all may hear. If anyone would come after me, he begins, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. The cost of discipleship is arriving, not as thunder, but as quiet truth. No heart can ignore. The air is thick with silence after his last words. Some disciples bow their heads, others stare at him, breath shallow, hearts unsteady. Jesus takes a step forward, his expression no longer gentle alone, but deeply solemn, like a man speaking truth that cannot be softened. If anyone wants to come after me, he says, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. The crowd stirs. A few gasp quietly. They have seen crosses, Roman executions along the roads, bodies hanging as warnings to all who would rebel. A cross is not poetry, it is death. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, Jesus continues, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. A heavy stillness settles. His words are not an invitation to comfort, but to surrender. What good is it, he asks, if someone gains the whole world, yet forfeits their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? A wealthy merchant in the back shifts uneasily. A mother clutches her son tighter. A fisherman stares at the dust, thinking of how many times he has feared losing his life, his boat, his nets, his security. Jesus' voice softens but remains steady. If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this sinful and adulterous generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Some cannot meet his eyes, others cannot look away. Peter takes a step toward him, then hesitates. Lord, he begins, but no more words come. Jesus sees the fear, the confusion. His voice becomes gentle again. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Gasps ripple among the crowd. Love enemies, pray for oppressors. That you may be children of your Father in heaven, Jesus says. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. A soldier standing at the back, arms crossed, glances toward him with uncertainty. He has seen the cruelty of men. Yet this teaching is unlike anything he has known, unlike the law, unlike Rome, unlike revenge. Jesus continues, not lifting his voice, yet each word presses deeply on their hearts. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Do not even the tax collectors do that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Matthew, the former tax collector, lowers his head, yet somehow he feels no shame, only mercy. Jesus looks up at the sky, clouds drifting slowly across the blue. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. His eyes sweep across the crowd. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. A father in the front row whispers to himself, to lose. In order to find? The words echo inside him again and again. Jesus steps closer to the disciples. His voice lowers, not to hide, but to let them feel the intimacy of the call. Anyone who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Mothers hold their children a little tighter. Some feel tears rising. This call is costly. It demands everything. Yet even within the ache, there is a quiet beauty, like light streaming through storm clouds. And he says softly, do not be afraid. The Father knows every sparrow that falls. He counts every hair on your head. You are worth more than many sparrows. A small boy near the front smiles faintly. It is the first smile since Jesus began to speak of crosses. Jesus looks directly at his 12, faces worn by travel, hearts torn between fear and faith. Then his voice lowers further. "There are some standing here," he says, "who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." The words hang in the air, mysterious, powerful. The disciples exchange glances. What does he mean? When? How? Jesus finally turns, his robe grazing the stone. "Come," he says quietly to Peter, James, and John. "Walk with me." The crowd watches as the three follow him away from the city, up a rugged path that winds toward the high mountains. Their shadows stretch long in the afternoon light. They do not yet know what waits above, the light, the voice, the glory no human tongue can fully describe. They only know that the road is steep, the climb uncertain, but his steps are ahead of theirs, and so they follow, carrying his words like fire within their hearts. The path is steep and silent as Jesus leads Peter, James, and John away from the crowds. The sun hangs low, casting soft gold across the rocky slopes. They do not ask where he is taking them. They only follow, breath steady, hearts uncertain. Stones shift beneath their feet, and the wind grows cooler as they climb higher. They reach a quiet place near the summit. No crowds, no noise of the city below, only wind, sky, and the teacher standing before them. Jesus says nothing at first. He simply closes his eyes, as though speaking to someone unseen. The three disciples stand nearby, weary yet watchful. Suddenly, the air changes, like the stillness before a storm, only this is not a storm. It is peace. It is holiness. Then, without sound or warning, his face begins to shine, like the sun breaking open the sky. Peter gasps. James drops to his knees. John shields his eyes with trembling hands. Jesus' clothing becomes white, whiter than any cloth ever washed by human hands, radiant like lightning, pure as fresh snow under morning light. The glory is not cast upon him, it comes from within him. Then, two figures appear beside him, Moses, bearer of the law, Elijah, voice of the prophets. They stand with Jesus, speaking with him, their faces serene, as though heaven itself has stepped onto the mountain. Peter stammers, unable to hold his words. "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will build 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He speaks out of awe, not reason. He wants to keep this moment from fading. But while Peter is still speaking, a cloud descends, bright, brilliant, unlike any earthly mist. It surrounds them, and the air hums like creation itself is holding its breath. Then a voice, deep, gentle, unearthly, comes from the cloud. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The sound shakes the mountain, not with violence but with glory. The disciples fall face down to the ground, terrified. For a moment all they hear is their own breathing and the thundering of their hearts. Then a hand rests lightly on Peter's shoulder. "Rise," Jesus says softly, his voice familiar again. "Do not be afraid." The disciples lift their heads. The cloud is gone. Moses and Elijah are gone. Only Jesus remains, no longer clothed in blinding light, but in simple garments, calm and steady. Yet something is different. His face still seems to carry the echo of that glory. His eyes seem deeper, clearer, filled with a light that no darkness can touch. They rise slowly, still shaken. No one speaks. Words feel too small. Jesus begins to descend the mountain, and they follow quietly. The sky stretches wide before them. The world below feels distant and dim. As they reach the lower slopes, he says without turning, "Tell no one what you have seen, until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The words strike like cold wind. Raised from the dead? They glance at one another. They do not dare question him, but they do not understand. Peter finally whispers, "Lord, why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus looks at them gently. Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him. They did to him whatever they pleased. They realize then he is speaking of John the Baptist. And so, Jesus adds quietly, the Son of Man will also suffer at their hands. The road levels beneath their feet as they near the base of the mountain. Their minds are full of light, of prophecy, of suffering. Below, the world awaits again. voices, sicknesses, unbelief, demons. But something within them has changed. They have seen who he truly is, not only teacher, not only healer, but the Son, clothed in the glory of God. Yet before they can speak or breathe a prayer of thanks, they see a crowd gathered around the other disciples. Voices are raised. A boy lies motionless on the ground. His father cries out in desperation. Jesus steps forward, his face calm, his presence like dawn after night. The mountain's light fades behind them, but its truth remains, shining now, not on a mountaintop, but here, among pain, doubt, and human need. And so he prepares to teach them what kind of faith can move mountains. The mountain lies behind them now, but the light of it still lingers in their minds. Peter, James, and John walk close to Jesus, their thoughts tangled between glory and the whispered promise of suffering. As they draw near the base of the hill, the sound of argument reaches their ears. A crowd has formed. The remaining disciples are surrounded, some accusing, some pleading, others simply watching. The air is thick with frustration and fear. A man breaks through the group, his face weary and desperate. He falls to his knees before Jesus. "Lord," he cries, "have mercy on my son. He suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire or into water." His voice cracks. "I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." Jesus looks at the boy, his body trembling, eyes distant, as though trapped somewhere far beyond the reach of human help. Grief flickers across the father's face. Jesus' voice is calm, but there's a sorrow in it too. "O unbelieving and twisted generation," he says softly, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring the boy to me." The father lifts his son gently, bringing him forward. As the boy nears Jesus, his body convulses violently, thrown to the ground as if the darkness inside him fears the light drawing close. Jesus kneels beside him. With one firm word, he rebukes the unclean spirit. The boy falls still, like a storm suddenly silenced. Then he breathes. His eyes clear. Color returns to his skin. The father gathers him into his arms, sobbing with relief. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Some fall to their knees. Others stare in shock. The disciples step back in awe and shame. Later, when the crowds have thinned and they are alone with him, the disciples come quietly. "Why could we not drive it out?" they ask. Jesus looks at them, not with anger, but with truth. "Because your faith is small." They lower their heads. Their faith had seen miracles, but still trembled in the face of darkness. Jesus reaches into his robe and holds out a tiny mustard seed between his fingers. "Truly I tell you," he says, "if you have faith even as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." They stare at the seed. They remember the parable. Now it is no longer a story, it is an invitation. "However," he adds, "this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting." Prayer. Fasting. Not as rituals, but as surrender, emptying themselves so that God may fill them. They fall silent. The mountain behind them seems to glow faintly in the fading light. They understand now, faith is not the absence of fear, but trust in the presence of God. As they walk on, Jesus speaks again, more quietly. "The Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life." The disciples stop. The words strike heavier than before. They have heard them once, but now, after the mountain's glory, they feel the pain of them more deeply. Sorrow fills their hearts. They do not understand why the path of glory must pass through suffering. Yet they follow. They come to Capernaum some days later. The Sea of Galilee glitters against the sky, peaceful and wide. As they enter the town, collectors of the temple tax approach Peter. "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" they ask. Peter answers quickly, "Yes, he does," though he's unsure. Later inside the house, Jesus speaks first. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect taxes? From their own children or from others?" "From others," Peter replies. "Then the children are exempt," Jesus says softly. "But so that we do not cause offense, go to the lake, throw out your line and take the first fish you catch. Open its mouth and you will find a coin. Take it and give it to them for you and me." Peter goes. And just as he said, there it is. a coin glinting inside the fish's mouth. It is not about money. It is about humility, obedience, and trust. Faith not only for miracles, but for ordinary submission. As evening falls, Jesus gathers them once more. There is something deeper he must teach, something about true greatness, not in power, but in humility. A child stands nearby, watching him. Jesus calls the child to himself, and the lesson begins. The child walks toward him shyly, clutching a small wooden toy carved from olive wood. Jesus bends down, smiles, and gestures for the boy to come closer. The disciples watch, uncertain of what he means to teach this time. The boy stands beside him, eyes wide, sunlight warming his hair. "Truly I tell you," Jesus says, his hand resting gently on the child's shoulder, "unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." The words fall softly, yet they strike deep. The disciples glance at one another, unsure whether to feel humbled or confused. "Therefore," Jesus continues, "whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." He looks around at them. Men who have seen storms stilled, demons silenced, and the dead rise, yet still, he calls them to something simpler: humility. The child smiles at him. Jesus smiles back, then says, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." The disciples' silence says what they're all thinking. They've spent months arguing over who among them is greatest. Yet the Son of God just placed a child, unnoticed, powerless, pure, at the center. His tone changes slightly, growing solemn. "If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble," he says, "it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." The weight of his warning hangs in the air. Even the wind seems to stop moving. "Woe to the world," he says softly, "because of the things that cause people to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the one through whom they come." He turns his gaze toward the horizon, his voice both sorrowful and resolute. "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you, their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father." The boy looks up at him again, unaware of how divine a truth has just been spoken over him. Jesus places a hand over his heart. "The Son of Man came to save what was lost." Peter listens closely. The memory of his own failures stirs. The night he nearly drowned in the sea, the moments he doubted, lost, found, saved. Then Jesus begins to tell another story. "What do you think?" he asks. "If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off?" The disciples nod. They know shepherds who would risk much to find a lost lamb. "And if he finds it," Jesus says, eyes alight, "truly I tell you, he rejoices more over that one sheep than over the 99 that did not wander." The boy beside him grins. Even he understands. The shepherd's joy is simple, pure, undivided. "In the same way," Jesus finishes, "your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish." He steps back, letting the parable sink in. The disciples begin to whisper among themselves. They understand the words, but they sense he's leading to something deeper. Peter, ever the one to speak, takes a breath. "Lord," he asks, "how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times. Jesus turns toward him slowly, his eyes full of patient love. "I tell you," he says, "not 7 times, but 77 times. Peter's mouth opens slightly. 77. The number sounds impossible. Jesus continues before anyone can respond. "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he could not pay, the master ordered that he, his wife, and children be sold to repay the debt." The disciples exchange uneasy glances. The amount is staggering, impossible to repay. But the servant fell on his knees before him, Jesus says. He begged, "Be patient with me, and I will pay back everything." The master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Relief flickers through the listeners' faces. But that same servant, Jesus goes on, went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. Peter's face tightens. The irony is unbearable. The fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay it back." But he refused. Instead, he had the man thrown into prison. The disciples murmur quietly. Even the child frowns. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went to their master. Then the master called the wicked servant back and said, "You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had on you?" Jesus' voice lowers, firm as stone. In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. The lesson lands hard. Faces fall. Peter looks at the ground. Jesus' eyes move gently from one man to another. "This," he says softly, "is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." Silence. Not guilt, but understanding, heavy and holy. The child still stands beside him, innocence unbroken. Jesus rests his hand lightly on the boy's head. "Keep your hearts like his," he says, looking at his disciples. "Quick to forgive, slow to accuse, pure in love." The moment lingers, quiet and deep. And from that stillness, Jesus begins to speak again. Not of forgiveness now, but of mercy toward enemies, a lesson that will stretch their hearts even wider. The disciples are quiet, their hearts still absorbing his words on forgiveness. The child has been led back to his mother, and the gentle hush of the crowd remains. Jesus sits upon a stone, hands resting over his knees, and looks out at the faces before him, bruised by life, hardened by Rome, hurt by neighbors, and divided by grudges older than memory itself. His voice is calm when he speaks again, but the words cut deeply. "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.'" Several nod, some fold their arms. It is what they were taught, what they've lived. "But I tell you," Jesus says, "love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." The words fall like a stone into still water, rippling through every heart. A fisherman clenches his jaw. A former zealot looks away, anger burning beneath the surface. A woman whispers under her breath, "Even the Romans?" "Yes," his gaze seems to say, "even them. That you may be children of your Father in heaven," Jesus continues, "for he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." The crowd is silent. They know it's true. The sun doesn't choose where to shine. The rain doesn't check who deserves it. God gives, without favoritism, without spite. "If you love those who love you," he asks, "what reward will you get? Do not even the tax collectors do that?" Matthew shifts, lowering his eyes. "And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that?" A few breathe in, sharp and uneasy. Love might be easy among friends, but this is holy ground. Jesus rises slowly to his feet. His voice is neither soft nor harsh. It is steady, full of truth. "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Not perfect without flaw, perfect in mercy, perfect in compassion, perfect in love. He lets the words rest. The crowd does not move. Hearts wrestle inwardly, some resisting, some bending, some breaking open. Then he continues. "If someone strikes you on the right cheek," he says, "turn to them the other also." The crowd shifts uncomfortably. Some shake their heads. This is not how the world works. The world says fight. The world says repay. "And if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic," he says, "let them have your cloak as well." A murmur rises, confusion, disbelief. "If someone forces you to go 1 mile," he adds, "go with them too." Every man knows what he is referring to. Roman soldiers can demand any Jew to carry their pack for 1 mile. To walk another mile willingly feels impossible. But Jesus does not flinch. "Give to the one who asks you," he says, "and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." It's not weakness he speaks of. It's strength. Strength that refuses hatred, resistance that refuses to mirror evil. A man in the back, his arm marked by a Roman whip, raises his voice softly. "But Lord, how can we love those who harm us?" Jesus looks at him with sorrow and compassion. Because, he says, if you only return what you receive, love for love, hate for hate, then darkness never ends. But if you choose love where none is given, then light begins. A woman wipes tears from her cheeks. His tone softens. Your Father knows your pain. He sees every injustice, but his victory does not come by swords. It comes by hearts transformed. He pauses, then lifts his eyes to the sky. Do not judge, he says, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. He bends down, picking up a small stone. He turns it in his hand. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, he asks, and pay no attention to the plank in your own? A few smile awkwardly. The truth stings but also heals. First, he says, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's. His meaning is clear. Love first, judge last. The sun begins to lower. A quiet peace settles like a soft blanket over the crowd. People breathe differently now, slower, deeper, as though something heavy has been laid down. Jesus gently releases the stone in his hand, letting it fall softly to the earth. The message is not finished. There is still more to understand: how love protects, how it restores, and how the Father never abandons those who seek him. And so he lifts his voice once more to teach them how to ask, how to seek, and how to trust the heart of God. The stone slips gently from his hand and lands quietly in the dust. The people are still, hearts stirred by his call to love even enemies, to forgive, to release judgment. Yet, he is not finished. His eyes move across the faces before him, soft but searching. Do not judge, he has said, or you too will be judged. Some are humbled, some feel exposed, all are listening. Jesus lifts his hand slightly, speaking once more. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, he asks, and pay no attention to the plank in your own? A few in the crowd smile faintly, perhaps at the vivid absurdity of the image, someone trying to correct another while blinded themselves. Yet beneath the humor, the truth presses deep. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own? He pauses a moment, letting the question linger like a mirror before their hearts. You hypocrite, he says, not in anger, but in firm compassion. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's. A hush drapes over them. Self-examination before correction, humility before judgment. Jesus continues, make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is known by its fruit. He looks toward the fig trees lining the edge of the courtyard. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. He rests his hand gently against his chest. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings out good things stored up in him, and an evil man brings out evil things stored up in him. The message is clear. The heart is the root. Actions and words are the fruit. Jesus then shifts. His tone softening once again. And so I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Some blink, surprised by the sudden tenderness of his words. Seek, and you will find, he says. Knock, and the door will be open to you. Mothers, widows, laborers, all hear hope in those words. Hope that God listens. Hope that heaven is not sealed. For everyone who asks receives, he continues, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. An older man at the edge of the crowd wipes his eyes. All his life, he has felt too unworthy to knock, too stained to ask. Jesus looks kindly at him. Which of you, he asks, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Soft laughter moves through the crowd, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake. Heads shake. Even the poorest father would not mock his hungry child. If you, though imperfect, Jesus says, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? The words sit gently over them like warm sunlight. God is not far, not silent, not cruel. He is Father, kind, attentive, near. Jesus then brings it together. So in everything, he says, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Some call it the greatest sentence ever spoken. They don't know it yet, but this will echo through centuries, the rule written not on stone but on hearts. He lets them rest in the quiet of that truth for a moment longer. Then, his voice grows steady, cautionary. "Enter through the narrow gate," he says. "For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it." Several shift where they stand, uneasy. "But small is the gate," he says, "and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." The weight returns, not of fear, but of choice. Jesus looks out at them, not as a distant king, but as one who loves deeply. "Not all who say to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father." Some stiffen, others bow their heads. Many will say to me on that day, "Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, drive out demons, perform miracles?" He pauses, his eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "And I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who act without righteousness." The silence that follows is heavy. Faith is not performance. It is relationship, known by love, obedience, humility. Jesus steps forward, speaking one more image into their hearts, one that will test every listener. "Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice," he says, "is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." And with that, he begins to reveal what happens when the winds rise, the rain falls, and the storm tests every foundation. The wind drifts softly across the hillside as Jesus pauses, letting the weight of his words rest in the hearts of those who hear. Faces are turned toward him, some in awe, some in fear, some in silent yearning. The air feels still, as though creation itself is waiting for what comes next. "Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice," Jesus says at last, "is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." A few in the crowd nod slowly. They know what it means to build, to labor beneath the sun, to lay stone on stone, to trust that the foundation will stand. "The rain came down," he continues. "The rivers rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because its foundation was on the rock." Some close their eyes, imagining it, storms roaring across the land, rain pounding rooftops, wind screaming through narrow streets. Yet one house stands firm, unshaken in the chaos. "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice," Jesus says, his tone growing solemn, "is like a foolish man who built his house on sand." A few glance toward the dry riverbeds nearby. Sand shifts easily. Sand gives no anchor. "The rain came down, the rivers rose, the winds blew and beat against that house," he says, "and it fell with a great crash." The words strike with quiet force, not because they are loud, but because they are true. The people know storms. They know how suddenly the skies can darken. They know how easily everything can collapse when the foundation beneath is weak. Jesus looks around at them, not to frighten, but to warn, to save. "Storms will come," his eyes seem to say, "but what you build on will decide whether you stand or fall." A father near the front pulls his child close, holding him as though anchoring him to something solid. A widow bows her head, whispering a prayer in silence. Jesus lowers his hands. The image lingers, rock and sand, obedience and neglect, strength and ruin. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a soft breeze stirs the tall grasses at the edge of the crowd, like breath returning to the world. When he speaks again, his voice is gentle. "Come to me," he says, "all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." A woman with tired eyes looks up. A shepherd exhales slowly. These are words their souls have been aching to hear. "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me," Jesus says, "for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Rest, not just for bodies, but for souls worn down by fear, guilt, striving, and sorrow. "For my yoke is easy," he says, "and my burden is light." Tears slip quietly down a few cheeks. This teacher does not crush. He lifts, he carries. Jesus looks out over the crowd, not as a distant ruler, but as a shepherd gathering the scattered. His next words come not as a command, but as a promise. "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he says, "for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed the poor? The crowd listens, breath held. Blessed are those who mourn, he says, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Each line feels like water on dry ground. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. The people who feel small, unseen, unworthy, these are the ones he calls blessed. Jesus looks at them with compassion. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. A young girl presses her hands to her chest, holding on to every word. Blessed are the peacemakers, he says, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He does not say, blessed are the powerful, blessed are the popular, blessed are the strong. He says, blessed are the broken, the gentle, the wounded who still choose love. The crowd is silent again, but not in confusion, in awe. Jesus steps forward slightly. His robe brushes the dust. His voice softens even further. You are the salt of the earth, he says. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. His eyes rest on them, men, women, children, the forgotten, the rejected. He speaks to them as though they matter, as though the world needs their light. Let your light shine before others, he says, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The sun begins to lower, casting warm gold across their faces. People breathe differently now, lighter, steadier, and as the shadows stretch across the earth, Jesus turns his gaze toward the poor, the sick, and the forgotten standing at the edge, those whose pain has kept them silent. He begins to walk toward them. Jesus walks toward those standing on the outer edge of the crowd, the ones others step around, the ones whose pain is easier to ignore. A blind man leans against a stone wall, his empty eyes staring into darkness. Nearby, a mother holds her sick child close, rocking him gently though his skin is pale and his breathing faint. Others gather, beggars wrapped in worn cloaks, men thin from hunger, women with dust in their hair and sorrow in their faces. Jesus raises his hands not to condemn, but to bless. Blessed are you who are poor, he says softly, for yours is the kingdom of God. Some blink in disbelief. Blessed? The poor? Blessed are you who hunger now, he continues, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. His voice is steady, yet filled with compassion. The world sees weakness. He sees worth. The world sees shame. He speaks blessing. A woman wipes her tears on her sleeve. No one has ever called her blessed. Jesus steps closer to the sick child. His small chest rises weakly. The mother looks up, fear and hope tangled in her eyes. Jesus kneels beside them. He places his hand on the child's forehead, gently, like a father waking his son from sleep. Little one, he whispers. The fever melts away. Color returns to the child's cheeks. His breathing becomes steady, calm. The mother gasps, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Tears spill, but this time they are not from grief. Whispers spread through the crowd. Hearts pound. Some fall to their knees. Jesus stands and walks toward the blind man. The man hears his footsteps and lifts his head. Son of David, the blind man says, voice shaking, have mercy on me. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asks. Lord, he whispers, I want to see. Jesus reaches out and touches the man's eyes. Receive your sight, he says. Your faith has made you well. The man blinks. Light, blinding, golden, floods his world. Faces, stone tears, everything rushes in at once. He falls to the ground, laughing and crying at the same time. The crowd gasps as though they too are seeing for the first time. But Jesus is not finished. A man with leprosy stands at a distance, his body scarred, his hands wrapped in torn cloth. The crowd steps away from him, fear tightening their faces. He falls to his knees. Lord, he says quietly, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus steps forward when others step back. He reaches out and touches the man's shoulder, touches him before healing him. I am willing, he says. Be clean. In an instant, the man's skin becomes smooth. The pain leaves his eyes. He touches his own face in disbelief. He is whole. A murmur rises, not of doubt, but of awe. Mercy is no longer just words. It is movement, hands, healing. Jesus looks at those gathered, some wealthy, some poor, some clean, some broken. You are the light of the world, he tells them. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. The poor feel seen, the broken feel remembered. He moves among them, speaking, touching, healing. A paralyzed man is lowered from a rooftop by friends desperate for help. Jesus sees their faith. "Your sins are forgiven," he says. Some scribes whisper, offended. Jesus turns to them. Which is easier, to say, "Your sins are forgiven," or "Get up and walk"? Then to the paralyzed man, he says, "Rise, take up your mat, and go home." The man stands. His legs, once lifeless, now strong beneath him. He walks. People shout. Others fall to their faces. All feel the weight of the holy in their midst. Evening draws near. The sun sinks behind the hills, painting the sky with gold and crimson. Jesus sits upon a stone, hands resting. In his lap, the crowd settles again. He speaks once more, voice gentle in the cooling air. "Do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth," he says, "but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Some glance at their coins, others at their wounds now healed, some at their children resting peacefully in their arms. Jesus lifts his eyes to the sky. "The kingdom does not belong to the proud," he says. "It belongs to the meek, to the broken-hearted, to those who know their need for God." A hush falls again. And just as hope rises, a shadow appears at the edge of the crowd. Pharisees, scribes, men in fine robes, faces hard with pride and suspicion. They have heard of his words, his miracles, and they do not come to listen. They come to challenge. Jesus sees them approach. He remains still, because now he will speak not only to the broken, but to the hardened. The Pharisees linger at a distance, whispering among themselves, but Jesus turns away. He begins to walk with his disciples toward the hills near the Sea of Galilee. Word spreads faster than their feet can carry them. By the time they reach the slope, thousands are already gathered, men, women, children, following him not just out of curiosity, but hunger. Hunger for healing. Hunger for truth. Hunger for hope. Jesus looks over the vast crowd. Their faces are tired, their clothes worn from travel. The sun hangs high above them, and yet none leave. They are willing to stay, even if it means going hungry. Philip leans close to Jesus and whispers, "Lord, where can we buy bread for all these people?" Andrew adds quietly, "There is a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what is that for so many?" Jesus does not answer with worry. Instead, he says, "Have the people sit down." The crowd settles on the grass. Jesus takes the small loaves into his hands. He lifts his eyes to heaven and gives thanks, not for abundance, but for what little they have. Then he begins to break the bread, piece after piece after piece. The disciples move through the crowd, handing bread and fish to everyone who reaches out, and somehow there is always more. Mothers feed their children, fathers eat in quiet wonder. Those who came with nothing now sit with full hands and fuller hearts. By the time the meal is finished, over 5,000 people have eaten their fill. Jesus tells them, "Gather the leftovers." They do, and 12 baskets overflow with fragments. The people stare at him with awe, whispering, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." But Jesus does not seek their crown. He slips away to the mountain alone as evening settles over the hills. Night falls. The disciples take a boat across the lake while Jesus remains behind. Wind whips across the water. Waves rise. The boat groans beneath them. Fear fills the fishermen's hearts. This sea has taken lives before. Then, through the storm, they see him. Walking on the water, their fear shifts into terror. "It is a ghost," they cry. But Jesus speaks, his voice steady through the wind. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter, trembling and bold all at once, calls out, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus simply says, "Come." Peter steps out. His feet touch the water, not sinking, not swallowed. He walks. But when he looks at the storm, fear returns, and he begins to sink. "Lord, save me," he cries. Jesus reaches out, catches him, and pulls him up. "You of little faith," he says softly, "why did you doubt?" They climb into the boat. The wind ceases. The water calms. The disciples fall to their knees. "Truly, you are the Son of God," they whisper. The next day, the crowd finds him again. Some came because they saw signs. Others came because their stomachs remembered the bread. Jesus looks at them, eyes filled not with anger, but with truth. "You are looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Do not work for food that perishes, but for food that endures to eternal life. They ask, "What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answers, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." Some still ask for proof. "What sign will you give us? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness." Jesus replies, "It was not Moses who gave you bread from heaven. It is my Father who gives you the true bread." They look at him, unsure. "Sir, give us this bread always." Then he says the words that silence the hillside. "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall never hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Some are moved, others are offended. He continues, unfaltering, "The bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Whoever eats this bread will live forever." Some turn away, unsettled. Others lean closer, wondering if their souls have been starving for something only he can give. The disciples stand quiet, some shaken, some strengthened, as Jesus prepares to speak of a greater feast still to come, one not of loaves and fish, but of covenant and sacrifice. Night settles across the Sea of Galilee, the sky darkening into deep blue as the last traces of sunlight fade behind the hills. The water, calm at first, begins to shift restlessly beneath the disciples' boat. Wind rises from the west, sharp and cold, breathing across the lake like an unseen warning. The oars creak, the boat rocks, the disciples strain forward, muscles aching as waves slap against the wooden sides. Jesus is not with them. He had stayed behind on the mountainside to pray. They rowed deeper into the night. The storm builds, clouds swallow the moonlight, wind howls through the mast ropes, waves swell and crash, drenching them in cold water. Anxiety spreads. Across their faces, this sea has claimed lives before. Some of them, fishermen from birth, know the signs of danger in the water. And now those signs are all around them. Hours pass. Still they row. In the darkest watch of the night, when strength begins to fade and hope stretches thin, someone sees a figure on the water, not floating, walking. The disciples freeze. Heartbeats pound louder than the storm. The figure draws nearer, steady, unhurried, feet resting on the rising waves as though they were solid rock. "It's a ghost!" someone cries. Fear spreads like fire. Then, through the wind, his voice comes, calm, familiar, cutting through the storm like light through cloud. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." The fear does not vanish, but it stills enough for one voice to answer. "Lord," Peter calls out, voice shaking, "if it is really you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus' reply is a single word. "Come." Peter climbs over the edge of the boat. The waves roar beneath him. For a heartbeat, he hesitates, but then his feet touch water that feels like stone beneath him. He walks, not because the sea changed, but because his eyes are fixed on the one calling him forward. The storm is still raging, yet he walks, step after step. Then the wind screams louder. A wave rises higher than before. Peter's eyes drift from Jesus to the water beneath him. His faith wavers. He sinks. Cold water rises around his legs, his chest, pulling him under. "Lord, save me!" Immediately, before Peter disappears beneath the waves, Jesus reaches out and catches him. "You of little faith," Jesus says softly, lifting him up. "Why did you doubt?" They walk back together across the water until their feet touch the deck of the boat. And as soon as Jesus steps inside, the storm stops. Wind dies, waves calm. The sea becomes as smooth as glass beneath the moonlight that now breaks through the clouds. The disciples fall to their knees. No one whispers about ghosts now. No one calls him just teacher. They bow their heads and say the only words that make sense. "Truly, you are the Son of God." By morning, they reach the other side of the lake. People recognize him. Crowds gather again. Some bring the sick on mats. Others cry out his name from the roadside. He walks among them, healing, touching, restoring. But in the disciples' hearts, something has changed. They no longer follow him only because of miracles. They have seen his power over wind and waves. They have seen how he reaches into storms and pulls them out. Yet even with faith growing stronger, questions remain like shadows. Why speak of death and rising again? Why say the Son of Man must suffer? Why does he tell them not to fear when the path ahead grows darker? Jesus leads them away from the sea, through dusty roads and quiet villages, until they reach the region of Caesarea Philippi, land of idols, altars, and forgotten gods. There, with mountains towering behind them and pagan temples in sight, Jesus turns to his disciples and asks the question that will shape everything that follows. Who do people say the Son of Man is? They answer. Some say Elijah, some say John the Baptist, others say a prophet. Then he looks at them, not as a crowd, but as friends. But what about you? He asks. Who do you say I am? Peter steps forward. His voice is steady. You are the Messiah, he says, the Son of the living God. The air feels lighter after Peter's declaration. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Yet Jesus looks at his disciples with a depth that mingles joy and sorrow. They believe, but they do not yet understand where this path will lead. He speaks to them of suffering, of rejection, of death, and of rising again. But their hearts, still full of dreams of glory, quietly resist the thought of a suffering Savior. They continue their journey, passing through small villages and quiet fields. Evening settles across the hills like a soft blanket. The group rests near a grove of olive trees. A faint breeze shakes the branches above, scattering silver leaves into the dusk. Some gather around the fire. Others sit apart, wrapped in their own thoughts. Jesus watches them, tired, uncertain, some still afraid. He rises and speaks, not to the crowds now, but to his closest friends. Do not be afraid, little flock, he says gently, his voice carrying in the quiet air. For your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. A few look up, surprised. He calls them a flock, small, vulnerable, yet guarded by a shepherd who never sleeps. Sell your possessions, he says softly. Give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will not fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. A branch cracks softly in the fire. The disciples listen, the flames reflecting in their eyes. For where your treasure is, he continues, there your heart will be also. They remember the crowds, the bread multiplied, the storm stilled, Peter walking on water and sinking. They remember how fear and faith wrestled inside them. Now Jesus speaks, not of storms or seas, but of the heart. Fear begins there, so does trust. He sits beside them. Consider the ravens, he says. They do not sow or reap, they have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them, and you are worth far more than birds. James watches a sparrow flit from branch to branch, its tiny wings catching the last light of day. Who of you, by worrying, Jesus asks gently, can add a single hour to your life? Silence hangs for a moment. The question feels like a mirror. And if you cannot do such a little thing, he continues, why do you worry about the rest? His voice is neither mocking nor stern. It is like calm water, steady and refreshing. He gestures toward the fields below, where wild lilies still glow faintly, under the fading sky. Look at the lilies, he says. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. Thaddeus runs his hands over the hem of his robe, thinking of how much time he's worried about clothing, food, respect, his future. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, Jesus says, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? His words do not condemn, they invite. So do not be afraid, he says again. Your Father knows what you need. The fire crackles softly. A few stars begin to appear in the sky. Instead, he says, seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. They do not fully understand, but something inside them rests. Then Jesus rises and walks a few steps away. The disciples watch as he looks toward the town below, lamps flickering in distant windows, families gathering at their tables. When he speaks again, his words are stronger. Be dressed and ready for service, he says, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet. His tone bears both tenderness and urgency. It will be good, he says, for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. He looks at them one by one, Peter, James, John, Matthew. and they feel it as clearly as a hand on the shoulder. Be ready. Stay awake. Do not let your hearts grow heavy with fear, comfort, or distraction. Jesus sits again near the fire. Night grows deeper. A lamb bleats softly from a nearby pen. The words linger. Fear not, little flock. Before the flames die down, he speaks once more, his voice quiet but firm. Be on guard against all kinds of greed, he says. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. They listen, they breathe. And from that stillness, he prepares to warn them of hearts hardened by hypocrisy, religion without love, faith without mercy. The night holds its breath. Morning light filters softly through the olive trees as Jesus and his disciples walk toward a nearby village. The crowds begin to gather once more, some eager to listen, others only to test him. Among them are Pharisees and teachers of the law, their robes clean, their expressions guarded. They stand at the edges, watching every movement, every word. Jesus turns to his disciples first, not to the crowd, but to those closest to him. His voice is low but firm. Be on your guard against the leaven of the Pharisees. The disciples glance at one another. Bread? Leaven? Jesus sees their confusion. Not the leaven in bread, he says quietly. The leaven of hypocrisy. A stillness settles. He speaks so all can hear. Nothing is hidden that will not be revealed, nothing concealed that will not be made known and brought into the light. A few Pharisees stiffen. The people fall silent. Jesus isn't speaking of rituals or laws, but of hearts. You polish the outside of the cup, he says, looking directly at the religious leaders, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence. His words are not shouted, yet they strike deeper than any raised voice. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, he says, sorrow in his tone. You are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but inside full of dead bones and everything unclean. A woman in the crowd gasps softly. Some Pharisees shift their feet, anger simmering beneath their calm expressions. Jesus continues, not with rage, but with truth wrapped in grief. You shut the doors of the kingdom in people's faces. You do not enter, nor do you allow those who are trying to enter. His eyes soften as he looks at the crowd, then back to the leaders. You clean the outside, he says, but God sees the heart. He steps closer, not to provoke, but to plead. First clean the inside of the cup, he says gently, and then the outside will also be clean. The words hover in the air, sharp and tender all at once. A young man in the crowd whispers, he speaks like he sees right through them. An older man answers quietly, he speaks like he sees right through me. Jesus lifts his gaze to the rest of the people. Beware of practicing your righteousness before others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. He speaks now, not of leaders alone, but of every soul present. When you give to the needy, he says, do not announce it with trumpets. When you pray, do not stand on the street corners to be seen. A woman lowers her eyes, ashamed by memories of prayers meant to impress, not to reach heaven. Your Father, Jesus says softly, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. He pauses, allowing hearts to feel the weight and the hope of those words. Then his voice shifts, gentler still. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body and after that can do no more. Fear the one who holds your soul. He gestures to the sky where a small sparrow flutters between branches. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God. He looks back at them, eyes kind. Even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Some breathe easier, others quietly wipe tears. Jesus then speaks of loyalty, not to traditions or power, but to truth. Whoever acknowledges me before others, he says, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven, but whoever denies me before others, I will deny before my Father. The crowd listens, hearts caught between fear and longing. A Pharisee steps forward. By whose authority do you speak these things? He demands. Jesus meets his gaze. I speak what I have seen with my Father, he says, but you speak what you have heard from your father. They bristle. Abraham is our father, they protest. If you were Abraham's children, Jesus replies, you would do the works of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth from God. Murmurs ripple. Some Pharisees withdraw, their faces dark with anger. Others remain, uncertain. Jesus turns from them and looks out toward the people once more. "The truth will set you free," he says. Someone asks softly, "Free from what?" He answers, "From sin, from fear, from the chains you cannot see." The crowd grows quiet again, because his words do not only expose, they invite. And so, from that place of conviction and mercy, Jesus prepares to speak of what it truly means to follow him, not as spectators, but as servants, willing to walk in light, no matter the cost. Jesus stands before the crowd once more, the wind stirring gently through the fields beyond. Golden stalks of grain sway like waves beneath the afternoon sun. He looks out across the faces gathered, farmers, widows, shepherds, merchants, children perched upon their father's shoulders, and he begins to speak of something they all understand: the harvest. "The kingdom of heaven," he says, "is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away." The people nod. They know this story well. Weeds among wheat are stubborn, tangled, nearly impossible to remove without ripping the roots of wheat with them. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, Jesus continues, then the weeds also appeared. The servants came and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy has done this," he says. Some listeners glance at one another. The enemy, the unseen, the one who corrupts what is meant to bear fruit. "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" Jesus says, the servants asked. "No," he replies, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest." A breeze runs through the field behind him, bending the wheat like an obedient choir. "At that time," Jesus says, "I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Quiet settles over the crowd, not fear, soberness, a reminder that everything growing now will one day be gathered, seen for what it truly is. Wheat or weed, true or false, rooted in him or rooted in the world, Jesus lifts his eyes toward the field. "The harvest is plentiful," he says, "but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." A young man tightens his grip on his walking staff. A woman presses her hand to her heart. Something in his voice says, "The time is not far off, the season is nearing." Then, more. Softly, he says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed." His hand rises, fingers pinching something invisible. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He smiles faintly. The kingdom does not arrive like a storm with armies. It begins like a whisper, like a seed buried in the ground, hidden, small, but alive. Again he speaks. "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked through all the dough." Unseen, quiet, but always spreading. Some religious leaders scoff quietly. They want a kingdom of swords, not seeds, thrones, not yeast. But Jesus continues speaking to the weary, the humble, the ones with ears to hear. "The righteous," he says, "will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father." His eyes drift slightly, not to the sky, but to something beyond it. Then his tone shifts, not harsher, but heavier. "The Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men. He will suffer, he will be killed, and on the third day he will be raised." The disciples stiffen. They have heard these words before, but still do not understand why harvest must come through sorrow, why seeds must fall into the ground before they grow. Peter's voice trembles as he speaks quietly. "Lord, this shall never happen to you." Jesus turns to him, eyes filled with gentle firmness. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." The air grows still. The field behind them is silent. No birds sing. Jesus looks at all of them, crowd and disciples alike. "If anyone would come after me," he says, "let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." The words settle like seeds in soil, some on rock, some among thorns, some on good ground. The sun dips lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the field. Harvest imagery lingers, wheat and weeds, barns and fire, seeds and soil. But now, a different kind of shadow grows quietly, a cross-shaped one, stretching toward Jerusalem. Jesus turns and begins to walk. His disciples follow, steps quiet, hearts heavy yet compelled. Ahead lies the road to the city. Ahead lies betrayal, a table, a garden, a trial. But for now, the teacher walks with steady purpose, because the harvest he speaks of cannot come unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies. The road beneath their feet is dry and pale, winding through hills and olive groves as Jerusalem draws nearer. The disciples follow quietly, dust rising with each step. There is no crowd here, no pressing voices, only silence and the steady sound of sandals against stone. Jesus walks ahead of them, not anxious or hurried, but with a resolve that unsettles them. He pauses near a fig tree, turns to face them, and speaks words that make the air grow heavy. "The Son of Man," he says, "will be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life." The words hang between them like a shadow. Some lower their heads. Others exchange uneasy glances. No one knows how to answer. They have seen him open blind eyes, calm seas, call the dead from their graves. How could death ever reach him? Yet his voice carries no doubt. Peter steps forward, heart pounding. "Lord," he whispers, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus looks at him, not with anger, but with sorrow. "You do not have in mind the things of God," he says quietly, "but the things of man." Peter's shoulders slump. His heart aches with confusion. He loves him too much to imagine losing him, yet cannot understand the kind of love that would choose suffering instead of escape. They continue walking. The sky above is bright, but to the disciples it feels dimmer now. Jesus speaks again, not to frighten them, but to prepare them. "If anyone would come after me, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." The words are not poetic. They are costly. A young disciple trails behind, repeating quietly to himself, "Take up your cross, follow me." He has seen crosses, lined along Roman roads, silhouettes of suffering against the sky. To follow Jesus now means following him there. As they draw nearer to a village, a mother comes forward, kneeling with her 2 sons beside her. She bows low. "Lord," she says, "grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one at your right and one at your left, in your kingdom." The other disciples murmur, irritation rising. Jesus looks at her gently, then at her sons. "You do not know what you are asking," he says. "Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink?" "We can," they answer, eager, though unsure of his meaning. "You will indeed drink from my cup," Jesus says, "but to sit at my right or left is not mine to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." The others grumble louder. Jesus calls them closer and speaks softly, yet with authority. "The rulers of the Gentiles lord power over their people, but it must not be so with you. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." He pauses. The wind rustles the grass. "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The words fall like a key, unlocking something, though they do not yet understand what. They walk on. Ahead, the road bends toward Jerusalem. From the distance, the city gleams, white stone walls catching the afternoon sun. Some feel excitement, others feel dread. As they pass through Jericho, crowds gather again. Among them sits a blind beggar named Bartimaeus. Hearing that Jesus of Nazareth is passing, "By," he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." People tell him to be silent. He cries louder. Jesus stops. "Call him," he says. They bring the man forward. Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord, I want to see." "Receive your sight," Jesus says. "Your faith has made you well." Bartimaeus opens his eyes. Light floods in. His first sight is the face of the one who restored him. He rises and follows Jesus on the road. The disciples watch in silence. They see miracles continue, yet his words of death echo louder than ever. The road climbs steadily upward. The city is closer now. Passover is approaching. Pilgrims flood the roads with songs and laughter, but beneath the surface, tension coils like a snake. Jesus walks ahead of them still. His steps do not falter. His eyes are fixed, not on the city alone, but on the cross waiting beyond it. Palm branches, crowds, shouts of Hosanna, all of it lies ahead, but so do betrayal, a supper in an upper room, a garden filled with anguish, and a cup no one else can drink. And so he keeps walking. The road to Jerusalem grows steeper, and the air feels heavier with every step. The disciples follow behind Jesus, and though crowds still gather to hear him, something has changed. The cheers are quieter, the whispers louder. Some follow out of faith, others follow out of suspicion. Yet Jesus walks with steady steps, speaking words that prepare his followers not for comfort, but for courage. One evening, as the sun drops behind the hills, they gather on a rocky hillside. The fire crackles in the cool air, faces glow with orange light. Jesus looks at them, not as a crowd, but as friends who will soon walk through fire. "If the world hates you," he says, voice low but unwavering, "keep in mind that it hated me first." No one speaks. Even the wind seems to pause. "If you belong to the world," he continues, "it would love you as its own. But you do not belong to the world. I have chosen you out of it." Matthew's hands tighten on his knees. John's eyes glisten. They feel both the honor and the weight of those words. Jesus glances at the sky, now deepening to indigo. "Remember what I told you," he says. "A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also." Somewhere in the darkness, a nightbird cries. The disciples stare into the fire, imagining chains, rejection, swords. Following him was never about safety, yet they did not expect it would cost everything. Jesus' tone softens. "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear the one who holds both soul and body in his hands." Andrew swallows hard. Peter stares at the flames. Fear rises like smoke, but Jesus keeps speaking, and his words pour like oil over the flames, calming them. "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny?" he asks. "Yet not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Torah, Father. And even the hairs of your head are numbered." He looks at each of them with quiet strength. "So do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." Their breathing slows. The fear does not vanish, but it shifts. It becomes something they can bear. Then Jesus stands, and the firelight outlines his figure against the night. "They will hand you over to councils," he says. "You will be flogged in synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings." James flinches. Thomas looks away. The thought of standing before rulers with no defense terrifies them. But Jesus continues, "Do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." A calm settles over them, strange, unexplainable. They do not feel brave, yet they feel seen, carried. Jesus sits again. His eyes reflect both sorrow and hope. "Brother will betray brother to death," he says. "A father his child. Children will rise against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me." The world around them is silent, like creation itself is listening. "But the one who stands firm to the end," he says, "will be saved." Hope flickers, small but steady, like the last ember in the fire. He leans forward. "When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. You will not finish going through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." Peter looks up, not fully understanding, yet holding on to every word. Jesus lifts his hand, palm open. "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven." A pause. "But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father." Peter's heart clenches. He does not yet know how close those words will cut. The fire begins to fade into glowing embers. The night grows colder. Jesus looks at his disciples, faces worn, eyes shining with quiet fear. And then his voice becomes gentle again. "In this world you will have trouble," he says softly. "But take heart. I have overcome the world." No one moves. No one speaks. But something inside them shifts. They don't feel invincible. They feel anchored. As dawn begins to break beyond the hills, Jesus rises to continue toward Jerusalem, toward the city that will welcome him with branches and then condemn him with nails. The disciples rise too, hearts trembling, but his words remain, stronger than fear, brighter than dawn. Ahead lies a colt, a city gate, palm branches waving, and a cross waiting beyond. The road to Jerusalem narrows, and with every step the shadow of the cross grows longer. Yet Jesus does not turn back. Around him the disciples walk in silence, still carrying his words about persecution and courage deep in their hearts. The morning sun rises high, casting a golden glow across the rocky hills. But their thoughts feel heavy, like clouds before rain. They're beginning to understand that following him means more than miracles and crowds. It means walking into suffering with open eyes. They stop near a quiet olive grove. A few shepherds lead their flocks nearby, unaware of the holy conversation unfolding. Jesus sits on a large stone, and the others gather close. His voice is gentle, yet filled with a depth that makes them lean in. "You have heard it said that blessing means comfort, strength, and ease," he begins. "But I tell you, there is a glory hidden in suffering." The words draw puzzled looks. Some shift uneasily. Suffering is what people run from, not embrace. He continues, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew looks at the ground. These are the same words Jesus spoke on the mount, but now they feel heavier. Closer. Jesus looks out across the hills. The prophets suffered. David cried out, "My tears have been my food day and night." Jeremiah wept for the brokenness of his people. Yet God was with them, not far, but near. He pauses, then recites softly from the Psalms, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." A soft breeze brushes past, as though creation itself whispers, "Amen." Jesus continues, "Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. A field must be broken before it can receive seed. A vine must be pruned before it bears fruit. A heart must be humbled before it can see God." John listens closely, remembering the transfiguration, the light on the mountain. Yet here, Jesus speaks of another kind of light, one that shines through tears, not clouds. He looks at his disciples with deep compassion. "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. He will be killed, yet on the third day he will be raised." They have heard these words before, but now they land like a stone thrown into deep water, sinking slowly, rippling outward. James whispers, "Why must you suffer, Lord? Why must the righteous feel pain?" Jesus holds his gaze. Because love is costly. The shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The grain of wheat must fall to the earth and die, or it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He rises slowly, walking a few steps toward the fig trees nearby. There is no crown without a cross, no resurrection without a tomb, no redemption without sacrifice. The disciples fall silent. Some wipe tears, others clench their fists. They long to protect him, to avoid the path ahead. But the truth is now clear. He is not running from suffering, he is walking toward it. Jesus kneels beside a small child playing with stones near the grove. The child looks up. He smiles. "In this world," he says softly, brushing dust from the child's hair, "you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." He stands again and speaks so that all can hear. "Do not despise the testing of your faith. Gold is refined by fire. Clay is shaped by pressure. Hearts are softened by tears." Peter looks at his own hands, rough, once only used for nets and rope. Now they feel unsteady, as though they will soon have to choose between sword and surrender. "The righteous will suffer," Jesus says, "but their suffering is not wasted. God gathers every tear, he writes every sorrow, and one day he will wipe every tear from their eyes." A quiet hope begins to stir, not the loud hope of crowds shouting Hosanna, but the quiet hope of someone who has walked through storms and still chooses to believe. The disciples breathe in the silence. Jesus looks toward Jerusalem, its walls faintly visible in the distance. "The time has come," he says softly. They rise. hearts heavy but willing. Ahead lies the city. Songs of celebration will greet them. But so will the plotting of priests, the tension of temple courts, and a supper where bread and betrayal will be shared at the same table. And so they walk. The sun drifts lower over Jerusalem, casting golden light over its walls and rooftops. The city is busy with pilgrims arriving for Passover, families leading lambs through the streets, merchants shouting, temple priests preparing. Yet beneath the noise, something deeper hangs in the air, an unseen tension, as if the city is holding its breath. Jesus walks through the temple courts, where shadows stretch long between the pillars. His disciples follow close behind. People gather around him again, some hungry for truth, others waiting to accuse. Torches flicker to life as daylight begins to fade. Jesus stands where all can hear him and lifts his voice. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Some gasp softly, others murmur in disbelief. Pharisees step closer, their robes brushing the stone floor. One of them calls out, "You are testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not valid." Jesus meets their eyes calmly. "Even if I testify about myself, my testimony is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from or where I am going." His words echo through the temple like the sound of distant thunder. He gestures to the great lamps towering above the courtyard, oil-fed flames used during the Feast of Tabernacles to symbolize God's presence leading Israel through the wilderness. "You have seen the light of these lamps," he says, "but I speak of a light no darkness can put out, a light not made by human hands." A few step closer. An old man leans on his staff, whispering, "Could this be the one Isaiah spoke of, the light to the nations?" Jesus continues, "You judge by human standards. I judge no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are true, for I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me." The Pharisees whisper angrily among themselves, yet no one lays a hand on him, for his hour has not yet come. As they leave the temple, the disciples walk beside him. Lanterns glow along the streets. Smoke from evening fires drifts upward into the darkening sky. "Lord," John asks softly, "when you say you are the light, do you mean you will remove all darkness?" Jesus looks ahead. "Not yet," he says, "but I will overcome it." They walk past a blind man sitting by the road, begging. Jesus stops. The man hears footsteps and calls, "Son of David, have mercy on me." The disciples wonder if they should move on, but Jesus kneels beside the man. He gently touches his closed eyes. "As long as I am in the world," he says, "I am the light of the world." And the man opens his eyes. Light floods in. The first thing he sees is the face of the one who healed him. The disciples watch quietly. They are beginning to see that his light is not like the light of the sun. It reaches deeper. It touches souls. They continue walking until they reach the Mount of Olives, where olive trees twist like ancient hands reaching to heaven. The city lies below them, glowing with the light of oil lamps. There Jesus speaks again, not to the crowds now, but to his friends. "The light is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you." Peter looks troubled. "Lord, what darkness?" Jesus' gaze settles on the temple. "The darkness that fears the light," he says. "The darkness that will try to tear it down." They fall silent. The wind rustles through the trees. "Yet the light shines in the darkness," he says softly, "and the darkness has not understood it." A calm settles over them, yet beneath it, sorrow quietly begins to form, like a storm building beyond the horizon. Jesus turns to them again. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." He looks at each one, Peter, James, John, Matthew, Thomas, and though night is closing in around them, his eyes hold a light that does not fade. "The world will soon see me no more," he says, "but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live." Somewhere below, the city grows louder as pilgrims eat, laugh, sing. Yet up here, under the olive branches, time feels slower, as though heaven is closer than ever before. The disciples don't yet know it, but soon the light will gather them in an upper room. Bread will be broken, feet will be washed, and betrayal will sit at the same table as love. Morning breaks gently over the Mount of Olives. A pale golden light touches the tops of the olive trees as Jesus stands overlooking Jerusalem, the city that sings psalms during the day and sharpens its nails at night. The disciples gather around him, quiet, sensing this day is unlike the others. There is no crowd pressing, no miracles being asked for, yet an unseen tension hangs in the air. Jesus turns to two of his disciples. "Go to the village ahead of you," he says. "You will find a donkey tied, with her colt beside her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone asks you why, tell them, the Lord needs them." They obey without questions. As they walk down the path, whispers of prophecy stir among them. "Behold, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey." Not a war horse, not a chariot, a donkey, the beast of burden, of humility, of peace. They return with the animals. The disciples lay their cloaks on the colt. Jesus mounts it, not as a conqueror with armor, but as a servant king with calm authority. Then they begin their descent down the Mount of Olives toward the city gates. Word spreads like wind across dry grass. Crowds gather, children, mothers, fishermen, travelers from distant towns. Some carry palm branches, others lay cloaks on the road before him. They shout with joy, voices rising like a tidal wave against the city walls. "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." Jesus rides slowly, the donkey's hooves stepping across garments and palm leaves. Faces are bright with expectation. Some believe he will free them from Rome. Others think he will claim David's throne. Most do not understand the kind of king who comes not to raise a sword, but to lay down his life. Children run ahead, waving palm branches like victory flags. Old men weep openly, whispering, "Could this be the one promised to our fathers?" The city trembles with noise. Yet Jesus remains calm, eyes fixed ahead, not on the cheering crowd, but on something beyond them. At the foot of the road, where the city's walls rise tall and ancient, he pauses. The shouts quiet for a breath. Jerusalem lies before him, beautiful and broken, and Jesus weeps. Not loud, not dramatic. Tears simply fall from his eyes as he looks at the city he loves. "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace," he says softly, "but now it is hidden from your eyes." Some near him fall silent. Others do not hear. The crowds press forward again, eager for joy, blind to sorrow. Jesus wipes his tears and continues forward. The gates of Jerusalem open. More people flood the streets. Pharisees push through the crowd, their faces tight with concern. "Teacher," one of them says sharply, "rebuke your disciples." Jesus looks at them, calm and unshaken. "I tell you," he says, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." The procession moves into the city. Palm branches wave like green flames in the sunlight. The sound of Hosanna echoes off stone walls, through marketplace alleys, beneath temple arches. But beneath the celebration, another sound whispers, quieter, darker, the rustle of plotting, the clinking of silver being counted, the silent footsteps of betrayal drawing near. Jesus enters the temple courts. He gazes at the merchants selling doves, the money changers exchanging coins. His face hardens with righteous sorrow. He walks to a table and overturns it. Coins scatter across the stone floor like rain. Pigeons flutter from cages. Merchants gasp and step back. "It is written," Jesus says, his voice resonating through the pillars, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." No one challenges him. The blind and the lame come to him there in the temple. He heals them, even as children continue to cry out, "Hosanna to the Son of David." The chief priests watch, their jaws clenched. They see that the crowd is hanging on his every word. Evening draws near. The sun casts long shadows through the courtyards. Jesus leaves the city and returns to Bethany with his disciples, just a short walk over the hill, where friends wait, where lanterns glow in quiet homes, where for one more night, peace remains. But they all feel it. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the end. It is the quiet before Gethsemane. It is the final dawn before the darkest night. The city of Jerusalem lies beneath a quiet sky, the noise of the day fading into evening. Shadows creep along the temple walls as golden light spills across the stone courts one last time. Jesus stands before the people, not with crowds shouting Hosanna, not with palm branches or songs of triumph, but in a stillness heavy with something holy and final. He looks at the faces around him. some filled with devotion, some with doubt, some hiding silent hatred. Yet he speaks not to win them, but to give them truth that no sword or empire can destroy. Heaven and earth will pass away, he says, his voice calm like steady wind, but my words will never pass away. The people fall silent, dust hangs in the air like suspended breath. Heaven and earth, temples, kingdoms, stones, stars will one day fade, but his words, they will outlive time itself. He continues, no one knows the day or hour, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, only the Father. Some tilt their heads, listening, others frown, confused, but his tone remains steady. Be on guard, keep watch. You do not know when the time will come. The disciples stand close, their hearts pulled in two directions, part glory, part fear. They know the tension in the air means something is coming, something they cannot stop. Jesus turns his eyes toward the horizon, where the sky blurs into shades of red and purple. As it was in the days of Noah, he says, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. People were eating, drinking, marrying, and they did not understand until the flood came. He turns back to them. So be ready, stay awake, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman clutches her newborn child. An old man leans against his staff. Boy sits silently at his father's feet. None of them fully understand, but all of them feel that this is no ordinary teaching. Jesus walks slowly through the court, his robe brushing the stone floor. Heaven and earth will pass away, he repeats softly, but my words will not. The sun dips lower. He tells them the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 wise, with oil in their lamps, 5 foolish, unprepared in the night. Keep your lamps burning, he says, for the bridegroom will come when you do not expect him. He speaks of servants entrusted with talents, some faithful, one afraid. To the faithful, he says, the master will say, well done. To the unfaithful, you knew, yet did nothing. But then his words soften. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, he says, he will separate the nations like a shepherd divides sheep from goats. The crowd listens, breath held. To the righteous he will say, I was hungry and you gave me food, thirsty and you gave me drink, a stranger and you welcomed me. Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. And to the hardened, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Some in the crowd weep, others tremble with anger, yet no one can ignore him. The sky darkens to deep amber. Torches are lit along the temple steps. Jesus stands still, the light flickering across his face. His eyes seem to hold both sorrow and victory. He stretches out his hands, not to call for applause, but to invite. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, he says, voice gentle in the fading light, and I will give you rest. The words feel like shelter in a storm. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, he continues, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Silence follows, not empty, but sacred. Some step forward in faith, others turn away, still others walk into the night to prepare betrayal. Jesus lowers his hands. He lifts his eyes once more to the sky, where the first stars begin to appear. Heaven and earth will pass away, he says one final time, more quietly now, as though speaking to time itself. But my words will never pass away. The moment stands still. Then he turns and walks toward the Mount of Olives, where olive trees wait like silent witnesses. The disciples follow. The night deepens, torches glow. Somewhere, silver coins are already being counted. But his words remain. They will echo in gardens and courtrooms, in upper rooms and empty tombs, in hearts across centuries. Empires will fall, stones will crack, stars will fade, but the word will remain forever.